The cabin lights dimmed as the plane leveled out. Passengers adjusted their seats, some already pulling out headphones, eager to sleep through the long-haul flight. But just a few rows from the front, a sound shattered the calm. A boy, maybe 8 years old, let out a piercing scream that made heads turn instantly. His small fists pounded the armrest, his face red with panic. Flight attendants hurried over, their polite smiles faltering as the screaming grew louder. Some passengers groaned, others whispered complaints. Beside the boy sat a man in an expensive suit, his tie loosened and eyes filled with helplessness. He wasn't just any passenger, he was a CEO whose face had been on magazine covers. But right now, he wasn't a businessman. He was just a father, terrified and overwhelmed. "My son, he's autistic," the CEO explained, voice breaking as he tried to calm the boy. "He doesn't understand what's happening." The father's words did little to ease the tension. The child's cries only grew more desperate, echoing through the pressurized cabin like alarms no one could switch off. That's when a man from the back stood up. He wasn't dressed in a suit. His clothes were simple, worn from years of use. Carrying a sleeping toddler in one arm, he slowly walked toward the chaos. Nobody knew it yet, but this single dad was about to do something that would silence the entire plane in awe. The flight attendants hesitated as the man approached. Some passengers frowned, assuming he was about to complain like everyone else. But his face carried no annoyance, just quiet determination. Balancing his own toddler against his shoulder, the single dad crouched in front of the CEO's son. He didn't speak at first. He just looked at the boy with calm, steady eyes, as though he understood the storm raging inside him. The boy's screams slowed for a moment, confused by the stranger's stillness. Then the dad reached into his carry-on bag and pulled out a small toy airplane. Its paint was chipped, its wings bent, but it was clearly well-loved. "My son loves this," the dad said softly, holding it out. "Maybe yours will too." The CEO looked stunned. His son, still crying, glanced at the toy, then at the man. He didn't grab it right away. Instead, he began to rock, eyes darting nervously around the crowded cabin. So the dad did something unexpected. He started making gentle airplane sounds, swooshing the toy through the air like a pilot guiding it through clouds. His toddler giggled in his arms, the sound light and genuine. Slowly, the autistic boy's cries softened. His eyes locked on the toy. Then, with trembling hands, he reached for it. The cabin went silent. The single dad smiled and carefully placed the toy in his lap. The boy's breathing steadied, his fists unclenched, and for the first time since takeoff, he was calm. The CEO's eyes glistened. He whispered, "Thank you. I didn't think anyone could reach him." The stranger just nodded, whispering back, "Sometimes it just takes patience, and a little kindness." For the first time since the flight began, the CEO's son sat quietly, clutching the battered little airplane as though it were made of gold. His rocking slowed, his breathing evened out, and he leaned ever so slightly toward the stranger who had given it to him. Passengers who had been sighing and rolling their eyes now watched in astonishment. A few even smiled, touched by the sudden peace that filled the cabin. The flight attendants, who had been whispering anxiously at the front, exchanged relieved looks and finally stepped back. The CEO exhaled, running a hand over his face. "I don't know how you did that," he admitted. His voice carried both gratitude and shame. "I've tried everything, therapy, calming techniques, nothing works when he panics like this." The single dad shifted his own toddler, who was now half asleep against his chest. "I get it," he said. "My daughter isn't autistic, but I know what it feels like to be judged. To feel like you're failing as a parent. People don't always understand." The CEO blinked, surprised. No one ever spoke to him this way, not with pity or awe, but with raw, human understanding. For a moment, there was silence between them. The boy, still holding the toy, made a small humming sound, the beginning of a laugh. The CEO's eyes widened. He doesn't laugh around strangers. The single dad chuckled softly. Kids can sense who sees them for who they are, not what they're missing. The cabin, once filled with tension, now held a fragile kind of warmth. What started as a meltdown was turning into something no one could have predicted, a connection that would change both fathers forever. The flight continued smoothly, but in row 7, something extraordinary was unfolding. The autistic boy, who only minutes earlier had been screaming uncontrollably, now sat cross-legged on his seat, guiding the toy plane through the air just like the single dad had shown him. The passengers who had once glared now leaned back, watching in quiet wonder. It wasn't just silence filling the cabin, it was a sense of shared relief, even admiration. The CEO leaned closer to his son, whispering, "You like that plane, buddy?" To his astonishment, the boy nodded. A small, deliberate nod. The CEO's throat tightened. He couldn't remember the last time his son had responded so clearly under stress. The single dad smiled. "He's doing amazing," he said gently. Then, shifting his own toddler into his lap, he added, "You know, sometimes it's not about stopping the meltdown. It's about joining their world until they feel safe again." The CEO swallowed hard, humbled. He had built billion-dollar companies, solved impossible business problems, yet his greatest challenge had always been reaching his own son. And here, a stranger, a single dad with no wealth, no power, had done it in minutes. The boy suddenly held out the toy, offering it back. His father froze. Sharing wasn't something his son did easily. But before the CEO could react, the boy placed the toy in the single dad's toddler's hands. Gasps rippled through the nearby seats. The toddler giggled, and the boy let out a laugh, a clear, bright sound that filled the cabin. Tears brimmed in the CEO's eyes. This wasn't just calmness. This was connection. And it was nothing short of a miracle. The CEO sat back in his seat, eyes wet, heart pounding. For years, he had begged specialists, spent fortunes on therapies, and fought endless battles just to give his son a chance at peace. Yet here, on a crowded airplane, a stranger with nothing more than patience and an old toy plane had unlocked something priceless. The boy now sat quietly, occasionally giggling as his new little friend, the toddler, clumsily zoomed the toy back and forth. Two children, worlds apart in background, had found a way to connect without words. The CEO turned to the man beside him. "I don't even know your name," he said softly. The single dad extended a hand. "Ethan." "Daniel," the CEO replied, shaking it firmly. "I owe you more than I can ever repay." Ethan shook his head. "You don't owe me anything. We're all just parents trying our best. Sometimes, we just need someone to step in when it gets too hard." The words hit Daniel harder than any boardroom deal ever had. He realized, in that moment, that his wealth couldn't buy the kind of compassion Ethan had shown. As the plane prepared for landing, passengers who had once grumbled now clapped softly, not out of mockery, but respect. They had witnessed something rare, humanity at its best. When the flight touched down, Daniel looked at Ethan with newfound resolve. "You may not know it yet," he said, "but you just changed 2 lives today, my son's and mine." Ethan smiled, adjusting his sleepy daughter in his arms. Maybe that's the miracle no one expected. And as they walked off the plane, strangers moments ago, they carried with them a story that would stay in every heart on that flight forever.